Thank you all, everyone. My name's Kumar Venkateswar. I'm part of Amazon Web Services, and we're here to talk about the integration of Amazon Web Services, SageMaker, and Domo, as well as to do a little bit more of a deep dive than I had a chance to do earlier today. So, at the high level, SageMaker is a product that is intended to accelerate the process from ideation to production. And the way that we think about the process, the way that we break out that process of machine learning is we think about a build phase, a train phase, and a deploy phase. And we want this platform to be able to allow you to build, train, and deploy these models quickly and at scale. And if you think about the way we think about models today, we think about individual models. Hey, can I do a single recommendation on this particular thing? Can I do a little bit of a forecast over here? Rather than thinking about tens of models that are working together or hundreds of models that are working together. And if you think about that as the goal that you want to get to, where you have a number of models that are able to piece apart different pieces of your data, develop different sets of understanding, and have models that are built off of the insights that you get from those models, unless you can do a single model quickly, you can't get to that stage. And the analogy that I think of is, I have kids, and when my kids were learning how to read, they would start out by reading individual letters. And they'd be really happy that they could identify a letter, but if they could identify a letter, that didn't really get them all the way to reading a page of a book. So they needed to go from letters to words to sentences to entire pages, and then they would be able to take in the entire context of a page and to be able to understand a book. And that's where we are with machine learning today. We're still at the letter stage, and SageMaker is supposed to help you get from letters to words to sentences so you can go on to the books. So how does our machine learning approach fit into this? First of all, a lot of the roadmap that we have, 90% of our roadmap, is driven by things that customers have asked us for. We've done things like open sourcing certain libraries and producing certain features, going into different regions specifically on the basis of things that our customers asked for. And even the fact that we're in machine learning was driven largely off of customer requests. We're doing things in AWS in general because customers asked for them. We also are pretty quick at innovating in the pace of innovation and the pace of feature release, because we have a reasonable sized team, and because we're customer focused, there's a clarity of purpose, which means that if you guys ask us for something and you say, this is what I need in order to make this machine learning platform work, we're quick at delivering it. And we delivered over 200 features last year. And that's true across all of our AI services. So one of the slides I showed this morning, and I have a slide on that coming up, is that we have a breadth of AI services. It's not just one. We don't think that the right answer in this space is one tool to rule them all, because there's a broad set of problems that you want to solve, and there's a great deal of variance in terms of what people are looking to do. It's everything from, I want to develop a new algorithm to solve a particular machine learning problem, to, I've got a set of pictures, and I just want you to do face recognition on that set of pictures so that I can figure out who my key customers are when they walk in, that sort of thing. So if you look at the way we're approaching it, we think that there's a need for a broad set of tools. We think that there's a need to support a changing environment in which there are multiple frameworks, multiple algorithms. PyTorch 1.0 is a deep learning framework that Facebook released last year, and that has become very, very popular in certain domain areas. And we were one of the first to support PyTorch in a platform. Our intention is to be agnostic as to which frameworks we support. We want to support them all, and we want to support the ones that make a difference to your business. And of course, all of this has an underpinning of security. None of this happens because we know that the data that you want to use machine learning for is the most critical data that you have. So we don't do anything that compromises the security of the data. We support things like encryption at rest, encryption at transit everywhere. We support virtual private cloud, which enables you to perform all of these operations without any of the data going over the public internet. There are a number of security features that we have had in order to help you not only with security, but auditing, as well as governance of these processes in general. So we understand that machine learning problems are not just tech problems. They're also business problems that you have to solve, and they fit into this broader context of how do we make our organizations able to use the data in a much more effective way. So if you look at the machine learning stack, and I always present the stack because I think this is good context for why you would want to use SageMaker. Even in a deep dive about SageMaker, I present the stack because you want to know why you want to use SageMaker for certain problems and why you wouldn't want to use SageMaker, why you would potentially want to use something like Amazon Comprehend, which is works on unstructured text and recognizes entities off of unstructured text. It can pick out names of people and various objects and things like that. It's able to do that in unstructured text, or recognition, which is able to do the same kind of thing with visual data. So why would you want to use different pieces of the stack? Well, for starters, if you have something that you're able to use very easily without too much effort from your data scientists, and you're able to leverage the work that Amazon has done with its data scientists and its data, why wouldn't you? So if you look at the top row of capabilities, these are all capabilities that we want to provide that if you think about it, it's, I don't want to mess with the model. I just want to be able to put in my data, get the results of that model out, and to be able to gain the benefit of that. And that's the entire top row. And you can even think of that as, I want to use that in conjunction with my own personal data set and my own personal models. So for instance, supposing you wanted to, you were a shoe manufacturer and you wanted to recognize your brand of shoe off of social media images, which is not an uncommon type of problem. But you also want to recognize whether it's a beach or whether it's a forest or something like that. You could potentially use recognition, Amazon recognition, in order to identify the environment around the shoe, and then you could use your own models in order to identify the images with shoes. So the fact that we have services that are immediately consumable for common use cases, as well as services that allow you to accelerate your own machine learning efforts, we think that it's important to have this set of capabilities in order to accelerate machine learning as a whole. So next, if we take SageMaker alone, and this is the outline of the types of problem that we're looking to solve with a machine learning platform service that's intended to accelerate the machine learning process. And there's a bunch of barriers, and there's a bunch of steps that you need to go through. First of all, it's just, things like collecting and preparing your training data. And Domo is a great product that helps with some of these problems, helps get it into one place, helps you clean up the data in certain ways and organize the data in certain ways. And that gets you some of the way there. But of course, you also want, for particular machine learning problems, you also need tools that allow you to do it in a much more unstructured type of way and a much more exploratory type of way. The next, you want to be able to clean and optimize the data, determine what machine learning algorithm that you use for it, and then you want to set up and manage those environments for training. Because when you're doing the exploration, you may even train your model, but usually you train your model on a small sample set of data because your environments are constrained. You don't want to spin up the big environments. You don't want to use your 100 gigabytes or terabyte of data every time. It's time consuming. It doesn't necessarily provide you with the right value. So you want to test out a little bit with a small sample set and then say, okay, you know what? This looks like it might be a promising approach. Let me try it on the full data set. So you want those environments where you would set that up. And then you want to be able to take those models and quickly deploy them into a production environment, because a model by itself doesn't help you. It needs to be incorporated into a process, into an app, into where it needs to be in order to provide value. And then once it's out there, you need to be able to manage that production environment, understand if there's any model drift, understand if there's data drift, understand when you need to change the model, when you need to retrain, when it's not working for you anymore. Because machine learning is about reacting to things that may not work. It's reacting to a changing environment. So just because it's out there and it worked 3 months ago or 3 weeks ago, maybe there was something you didn't know about, and maybe it's not working again. So you need to be aware of that. So if we start out with the initial task of how do you collect and prepare and explore data, the thing that SageMaker does in order to help you with that is it provides you with a set of pre-built notebooks that you can use in order to process common use cases. So for instance, things like churn analysis or product recommendations or things like that. SageMaker ships with sample notebooks. It provides you with a managed Jupyter environment that you can use in order to explore and try out these use cases. It's compatible with the security processes that your organization would put into place with other AWS services, so you can restrict it to certain buckets, to certain data locations. You can restrict it to using certain services. You can restrict it to certain operations. So it has the set of IT controls that IT would need to feel comfortable with handling secure data. But at the same time, it provides you with the level of flexibility that you can just write code against it, and you have example sets of code that you can use to customize to your own data set. The next thing we provide in order to help you accelerate the machine learning process is we actually have a set of built-in machine learning algorithms. So we have a team that develops optimized versions of these built-in algorithms, and they're optimized for large-scale data sets, and they're optimized for speed and cost. And we thought it was important to do this because, frankly, the versions of algorithms that we saw that were out there, there's a lot of different libraries and a lot of different open source. And sometimes those open source, the objectives of those open source libraries are not the same as what you would expect in a commercial setting. So in the cases where we saw that it was aligned, we adopted them, and we've created modified versions of the open source libraries that you can use within SageMaker. But in the cases where we saw that there was a gap, we actually developed these built-in algorithms that were built with reliability and the kind of scalability that you need in order to address terabyte, multi-terabyte data sets. So that's the next way we thought, okay, you don't need to be an algorithm developer in order to do machine learning. You can just use the ones that we provide. And we provide a set of about, I want to say we're up to 18 different algorithms now. And part of the reason we're up to 18 different algorithms is because customers asked us about certain spaces. They said, hey, can you provide us with an object detection algorithm that works on images within our data set? And we said, fine, if that's something that you need, we'll develop that. Can you provide us with something that lets us do log analysis and in the security space and provides us with a set of anomalies that we can go and look at? Absolutely. So we went ahead and did that. So we've got the set that allows you to get up and running quickly. Next, we decided that we would have this one-click training environment that allows you to do distributed training across a number of different instances and utilize either these high-performance algorithms that we developed, or you can utilize various common open source deep learning frameworks that are out there. There's things like TensorFlow and PyTorch and MXNet and Chainer. We also have similar implementations for things like scikit-learn that you can use for traditional machine learning. And the idea there is, I don't need to invent the environment. I'll just use the ones that you provide. Just give me a single API call or a single click that I can use in order to set up the environment, train, and tear it down. So That's the next thing. So you go from exploring the data to setting up your training to actually doing the training. And the results of that training is now in your environment. It's stored in your environment. You can now take that and then optimize it for various kinds of deployment targets. So some of these algorithms come with the notion of these hyperparameters, which are things like learning rate and so on that affect the quality of the model. And if those models that you trained initially don't necessarily meet your business objectives, then you can go through and in an automated fashion, iterate through a bunch of different combinations of these hyperparameters. Certain algorithms are more sensitive to that. So we actually think there's a great deal of value in gradient boosted trees, for instance, which have something on the order of 20 different hyperparameters. So rather than having your expert data scientist go through and manually kind of twiddle those knobs, the idea there is you provide these big ranges and you say, well, I think it's probably in this range and I think this other parameter is in this range, and then the machines will just go through and chunk through all of them, saving an enormous amount of time from your data scientist. Then the next thing, once you have a model that meets your business needs, you want to deploy it into a production environment that allows you to now incorporate it into applications. So you take that model, you deploy it into SageMaker's infrastructure, and SageMaker will take care of things like setting up monitoring, setting up logging, setting up automatic scaling. So you say, well, I think each instance, based on my testing, will take 20 TPS of 20 transactions per second of load. And at the point at which you hit 15 transactions per second, start up another instance. So it allows you to use the power of the AWS cloud to scale up and scale down your environment in order to meet your spiky workload needs. So not only do we take care of deploying machine learning and putting it into an environment that you can incorporate it into your applications, we're taking away the IT heavy lifting that's involved. So it's in an environment, it's deployed in a way that is compatible with high availability. It's deployed in a way that you can auto-scale, and you don't need to worry so much about whether it's going to scale up or scale down. It scales with your traffic. So next, you want to take that, and you want to be able to monitor and understand what's going on with that environment. And due to the fact that it has auto-scaling and it has monitoring integration, you're now able to go through that entire process, and guess what? It starts again. Because once you put that model out there, at whatever point, as long as it's working, it's great. But at some point, it's not going to work. You're going to encounter some specific thing that happens, some freak event, and you learn and you iterate. And this is the thing that we want to make sure that you're able to do, because machine learning is an iterative process. So as you go through this process, we'll help you all along the way to make it faster and faster and make this easier and easier. So next, I'll hand it over to Nihar to talk about how we're doing the same thing in partnership with Domo so that you can do the same kinds of things that you would do for your own application in Domo.
Thanks, Kumar, for that overview on SageMaker. How many of you had actually used SageMaker before? OK, so I think this was extremely beneficial to talk about an overview of SageMaker before we actually got into what we were trying to do with Domo. I wanted to talk a little bit about data science evolution and how Domo fits in. So if you look at how data is managed as an end-to-end pipeline, right? You have all your sources of data coming in. You have transformations. You have visualizations. You have sharing of data. And as you look at this ecosystem, we look at specific areas that Domo is already providing value today. So connections and bringing in data. So if your data is in Qualtrics, if it's survey data today, if it's Salesforce data today, you name a source, and Domo has a way to bring that data in. If we bring that data in, then our super fast, powerful engine can let you query at sub-second times. Anytime you've opened a card and scrolled around and done a drill down, you can see how fast and responsive Domo is. And all of that goes to the power of the engine. Domo also allows you to do transformations and acting on that data. So you have a set of tools, ETL tools, transformation tools, that allow you to transform your data the way you want, set up your data pipeline, And we don't stop there. There's a wide array of charts and figures that you can use. You'll see some announcements tomorrow on making that better in terms of telling your data story in a more elegant way. And then finally, you heard today about the business automation engine. So we don't stop at data and understanding that data. It's how you take actions on the data, and that actually completes your business process. So Domo is actually doing all of that. But where's that gap? If you see, and if you're a data scientist, yes, we have some tiles. We have some action tiles and scripting tiles. But some of the data scientists who've used this have struggled and told us that there's this gap that Domo, you need to fill in terms of exploring my data, creating models, deploying the models, retraining the models. And I think that's where the power of SageMaker comes in. And Domo is actually an open platform. It's meant to work with anyone. This morning, Josh James, our CEO, talked about there's no vendor lock-in. If you're on Snowflake, you can connect it to Domo. And in that same vein, if you are a data scientist today who has some training, some data, have already made some investments in SageMaker, we're going to allow you to bring them into Domo and fill that into your pipeline. Right? And why SageMaker? I don't think I need to say that again, but you kind of heard that. AWS is the leading vendor in cloud and AI services. You saw the breadth of customers and partners that they have. So it was an easy choice to kind of integrate with SageMaker as a first pass. And the problem that we're really trying to solve is if you have some investments in SageMaker, there's just no easy way. I was talking to one customer who's actually struggling with this because they have all their business data in Domo. They have some machine learning models trained in SageMaker, but there's just no way to connect. And it's just a frustrating experience today. So hopefully this is going to solve it. Let's take a peek behind how we're going to build this end-to-end. We talked about what Domo is doing today already. So if you look on the left, that's your ingestion, transformation, and getting data into Domo. What you will see is just like you have a Redshift tile, and I want to go back to that concept a little bit. If you're familiar with our Magic ETL and the transformation tools, we have something called as a Redshift transform. And we actually brought that in from direct feedback from our customers. Some of our customers told us, hey, I have these 4 or 5 Redshift functions that I want to use, and I want to use Redshift only. So we listened to that feedback, and as part of the ETL, we added a Redshift transformation. In that same vein, you will see a SageMaker tile in your data flows. And that'll be the entry point to access your models and set up your batch endpoints for SageMaker. Once you have that connection, you can fill up the last mile. And that last mile is not just visualizing your data, but it's also acting on your data. So you looked at some of the alert actions that Adam demoed today. As part of that, when you pipe your data, you get your predictions from SageMaker. You can use those predictions not only to visualize based on the charts that we have, specific to data science, but also trigger actions. So it could be, you could have a prediction which says, store X in Louisiana is going to be out of inventory soon. And that can trigger off an action to your supplier or to your sales manager saying that, hey, go to take a look at what's going on. So we actually think this is going to be a super powerful integration. And over lunch, Kumar and Ben, who's the head of AI, we were actually having lunch and talking about some of the future possibilities. And I'm super excited as to the opportunity here in terms of partnership with SageMaker. I want to close out with a couple of ways on how you can get access. So we'll do a full beta in the summer, but we are going to be sending out specific invites. It's more like an invite-only preview in the coming weeks for specific customers who've been identified. And then the reason for that is there might be some hacky things that need to happen in the beginning as we get this to full maturity. So if you're super interested, just give me your email after the session. Go to our product booth in the main pavilion. We'll be taking requests for invites as well as targeting some of the initial data science pilots that have gone out as part of Domo. And then we expect to have a full GA with more functionality in the second half of this year. So with that, I'll close, and then I'll take questions. Oh, wow, 3. Let's go, first row. We don't need this.
So this integration here, what's it kind of going to look like in the data center? Is it going to be like kind of like the Redshift access now, where it's like you can kind of think of it almost as seeing it separately from Magic ETL, or is it going to be kind of like the data science kind of tiles where you can actually see like a tile within the Magic ETL?
Good question. It's part of the data science suite, and you will see that as a SageMaker tile. Because we feel the real value of SageMaker in this context is how you pipeline your data. If you have trained models, the one thing I want to add is in the first offering, the only thing that you'll be able to do is do a batch. That's why I asked who's familiar with SageMaker. They have this mode where you can send it a batch of data and get predictions on an entire batch rather than just get one prediction. And that's where we can fill the pipeline. So as new data is coming into Domo, into your ETL flow, you can pipe that to the SageMaker batch endpoint and say, hey, this is my new predicted outcomes for this new set of data. So that's where you'll see it in the data flows section. I think there was a hand back there somewhere, unless you had the same question. Okay.
So thanks a lot. I actually think the intro on SageMaker was really helpful as well. It's kind of a continuation of that question. So it's maybe talk a little bit more about timing and logistics. So you talked about the usage of Redshift. Like you're saying, you're certainly going to have models that will take some extended amount of time to run, right, in SageMaker. And then you're going to be doing whatever downstream visualization with triggered actions and so forth in Domo. What does that look like? Are there refreshes scheduled? How is that all going to work?
So how do you use the data flows today? I mean, you can actually do it one of two ways. You can actually schedule your data. So as new data comes in, you can say, with my next batch of data, I want to schedule a prediction, which will go and get that information. Or the other way to do it today, and that'll extend with this model as well, is when your data changes, one of the input changes, you can say, hey, that is my trigger. I have new data coming in. That kicks off this new prediction batch.
The other thing I'll add there is usually inference is embarrassingly parallel, which means that you can use twice as many instances and do it in half the time.
Yeah.
SageMaker scales up to 100 instances in batch, and if you use the 64-core CPU machines, you're talking about 6,400 cores. It churns through data pretty fast.
I thought I had a question. Okay.
Yes, I would be interested to understand a bit better the Domo strategy in terms of managing an ecosystem of AI and ML partners. I believe that initially Domo had some Mr. Roboto in-house features, and there were some third-party vendors, I believe like Big Squid and others, small vendors, and now you have a massive partnership with Amazon SageMaker. So what's the overall strategy to animate this ecosystem and allow us to pick the right solution?
That's a great question. I think we can do a better job guiding you as to where you want to be, what solution you need to pick. And there's no one silver bullet, right? There are some capabilities that you'll get out of the box. So you saw some of the did you know announcements that happened on main stage today, where it's Domo is sort of recognizing the data that you have and bringing you insights, where we are doing some machine learning internally in-house. Then you already have your existing data science tools where you can, if you're just exploring data science, we have some prepackaged tiles and solutions that kind of help you get off the ground. If you're advanced, if you know exactly what your models are doing, if you know exactly how to train, you know I think Kumar mentioned there are 18 algorithms now. You know exactly, if it's retail, you want to do a deep AR forecasting, for example, you know specifically that algorithm is the best one to use. Then we'll allow you to connect with third parties. And I think Domo is an open platform. You'll see that message come over and over again, that there's no one real vendor, no one real partner. It's your tools in Domo. You saw that with the Jupyter announcement as well. So if your data scientist is familiar with the tool, you can be rest assured that Domo will find a way to make that a part of the experience. Yes.
Hey, so I'm interested in learning a little more about the Domo side of this. I've used SageMaker before, and we run algorithms for audience predictions and stuff through SageMaker. But one of the biggest challenges I see on the Domo front is that once you're crunching through this much amount of data with the processing power that you guys talked about, does Domo cache all this over when you connect on that data flow, and does that data flow have to run for so much time to get the predictive answers over, or how does it work? Can you elaborate a little bit on that process?
I can talk to you deeper about the architecture, but some of it goes back to what Kumar was saying in terms of parallelizing the inferences. So in the initial rollout, we are expecting that the customers are savvy enough, they have a trained model that we can directly use in the ETL, and then going forward, we'll start adding more and more capabilities to even train your model directly in SageMaker. So if you're just doing the inference part, that part is going to be fairly quick. And I think if, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but right now data flows are running a little bit slower. So I don't think it's going to be a lot in that context, although we are making some improvements in that aspect as well. You'll see some announcements tomorrow which talk about faster and more updated data flows as well. So it's part of that whole architectural change that's happening underneath.
Okay.
Okay, we can close, and then I'll be backstage for the next 15 minutes if you want to ask one-on-one questions. If you don't want to ask in front of an audience, I'll be back there. You have anything else? Okay.
No.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you all.
guys.